The alarm shrieked through the xenobiology wing of Station Helios 9, sending personnel scrambling from their posts. Dr. Vexith, the station's chief xenobiologist, felt his secondary heart skip in unison as he stared at the empty containment pens. The reinforced barriers stood intact, locks undisturbed. Yet all 6 Crithian predator cubs, apex hunters from a death world that made Earth look like a botanical garden, had simply vanished. Impossible, Vexith hissed, his scaled skin flushing crimson with panic. The security protocols are triple redundant. Nothing gets out of those kennels. His assistant, a trembling Quellan named Pip, pulled up the surveillance footage with shaking appendages. Sir, the cubs were here at 600 hours. At 0603, they're just gone. No thermal signatures, no movement indicators, nothing. Vexith knew what vanished Crithian cubs meant. In 3 hours, they would enter their first blood frenzy, a biological imperative that transformed playful younglings into killing machines capable of tearing through bulkheads. The station held 200 souls. If those cubs weren't found immediately, the body count would be catastrophic. Lock down the station, Vexith ordered, his voice steady despite the terror coiling in his gut. Alert all sections. No one moves alone. And someone find Sergeant Ryn. If there's anyone on this rust bucket who can track predators, it's the human. Sergeant Kayla Ryn was 3 sips into her morning coffee when her comm unit exploded with chatter. She listened to the panicked voices, set down her mug with deliberate care, and allowed herself a small smile. This was going to be interesting. She found Vexith in the security hub, surrounded by holographic displays showing empty corridors and sealed sections. The xenobiologist looked like he'd aged a decade in minutes. Sergeant Ryn thanked the cosmos, Vexith said, rushing toward her. The Crithian cubs have escaped. We have less than 3 hours before they go feral, Kayla finished, nodding calmly. I'm aware of Crithian biology, Doc. You want me to find them? Can you? Pip squeaked from behind a console. They're apex predators. Their homeworld has a hazard rating of 9.8. They can phase through. They can't phase, Kayla interrupted, already studying the station schematic. They're just really good at fitting through spaces you wouldn't expect. Flexible skeletal structure, retractable bone plating, makes them seem like they teleport. She traced a finger along the ventilation routes. But they're still cubs, which means they're still stupid. Vexith's frills flared with offense. Crithians possess remarkable intelligence. These juveniles have problem-solving capabilities that... They're babies, Doc, Kayla said, her tone gentle but firm. Smart babies, sure, but babies nonetheless. And babies do dumb baby things. She paused, cocking her head as a distant sound echoed through the vents. A peculiar growling, punctuated by high-pitched chittering. Like playing. She was moving before Vexith could respond, jogging through the corridors with the easy confidence of someone who'd grown up in Earth's Australian outback, a place that made most aliens' danger sensors explode just looking at the tourist brochures. She followed the sounds, ignoring the increasingly frantic voices on the comm. The noises led her to the station's recreation sector, specifically to the human quarters. Kayla's quarters. She stopped outside her door, which hung slightly ajar, and listened. The growling intensified, followed by a triumphant yip and what sounded distinctly like tearing fabric. She pushed the door open. 6 Crithian cubs, each the size of a large earth wolf, covered in chitinous armor plates that shimmered like oil slicks, with too many joints in their legs and mouths that split into mandibles, had formed 2 teams. They were engaged in the most intense tug-of-war Kayla had ever witnessed. The rope was her left boot. Tor, the largest cub identifiable by the distinctive crest on his head, led one team. His talons dug into the floor plating as he pulled with everything he had. His siblings pulled with equal determination from the other side, their adolescent growls sounding less like apex predators and more like puppies fighting over a chew toy. Her right boot lay nearby, already thoroughly destroyed. Well, Kayla said conversationally, I was going to requisition new boots anyway. 6 heads snapped toward her in perfect unison. For a moment, predator and human locked eyes. The cub's biological threat displays activated instinctively, frills extending, armor plates flaring, mouths opening to reveal multiple rows of crystalline teeth designed to punch through starship hulls. Kayla sat down cross-legged on the floor. If you're going to wreck my stuff, she said calmly, pulling a protein bar from her pocket, at least have the decency to share. She broke the bar into pieces and tossed them gently, one to each cub. Tor caught his midair, mandibles snapping with surgical precision. For several heartbeats, the cubs remained frozen in their threat displays, instinct warring with curiosity. Then Tor sat down. The others followed his lead, their armor plates retracting as they began to eat. Within seconds, they'd abandoned the boot entirely and arranged themselves in a semicircle around Kayla, watching her with eyes that held more intelligence than Vexith credited them for. "You know," Kayla said, addressing Tor specifically, "where I come from, we have creatures kind of like you. We call them dingoes. Smart, dangerous pack hunters." She reached out slowly, letting Tor sniff her hand. But even dingoes were once puppies, and puppies need structure. Tor's head tilted, processing. Then he leaned forward and pressed his armored skull against her palm. "Good boy," Kayla murmured. When Vexith and his security team arrived, armed with enough tranquilizer rounds to drop a Terran elephant, they found Sergeant Ryn sitting on her bunk, surrounded by 6 Crithian cubs who watched them with lazy, full-bellied contentment. The cubs had arranged themselves around the human like a living fortress, their body language protective rather than aggressive. "How?" Vexith managed, his translator struggling with his disbelief. Kayla shrugged, scratching Tor behind his auditory ridges. They were scared, hungry, and bored. The kennel locks weren't broken. They were never engaged. Your triple redundant security has a default state of open if there's a power fluctuation. There was a surge at 0602 this morning. But they could have gone anywhere, killed anyone. They're babies, Kayla repeated patiently. They followed the most interesting scent trail, which unfortunately for my footwear led here. She held up the mangled boot. "I'm putting in a requisition, by the way," Tor chirped happily, nuzzling into Kayla's side. Vexith stared at the scene. A human, one of those improbable Death World survivors who somehow conquered their planet, despite lacking armor, venom, or natural weapons, sitting peacefully with apex predators, and felt his understanding of the universe shift slightly. "How do we get them back to the kennels?" Pip asked nervously. "You don't," Kayla said firmly. "You fix the containment protocols first. Then you make sure whoever's in charge of them actually understands pack behavior." She looked down at the cubs, her expression softening. "And maybe you let them have some supervised playtime. Locking up babies in kennels 24/7? That's just cruel." Tor chirped again, agreement clear in his tone. Vexith's frills flattened in what might have been embarrassment. I will review our xenobiology procedures." "Good," Kayla said, standing up. The cubs immediately stood with her, falling into formation around her legs. "In the meantime, I'll escort these troublemakers back. Come on, cubs." "And Tor?" She looked down at the leader. "Next time you want to play, ask. My boots aren't cheap." The cub had the decency to look sheepish, if a predator covered in chitinous armor could look sheepish. As Kayla led the procession through the station, personnel pressed themselves against walls, staring in amazement at the human walking calmly with 6 apex predators trailing her like ducklings. In the recreation lounge, an Quellan engineer named Mix watched the scene and turned to his human colleague. "How do they do that?" The human, a mechanic named Torres, just smiled. "We've been training predators for 40,000 years. Dogs, cats, horses, even crocodiles. It's kind of what we do. But those are Crithians, Death World apex hunters," Torres shrugged. "Lady comes from Australia. That's a Death World by human standards." He took a sip of his drink. "Besides, there's something you aliens never quite understood about humans." "What's that?" "We don't see predators and think threat. We see them and think friend-shaped. Behind them." Tor's happy chittering echoed through the corridors as Kayla scratched his favorite spot. And for just a moment, Station Helios 9 felt a little less dangerous and a little more like home.